Good afternoon, my name is Benjamin Brushchuk. This is a recommendation report for Liz Stern, instructor at Fox Valley Technical College for Technical Communications. This is the feasibility study of prescribed fire and land management. The feasibility study that we ask ourselves is prescribed fire burning a better tool for land management than not managing the natural forests and grasslands? The reason for this report is to find out whether or not prescribed fire is the best tool for land management. Most of the material that we will talk about today will be what prescribed fire is, what is wildland fire, the benefits of both as well as the problems of both. I will include some history in it, and then we will lay down a factual summary, some conclusions, and then recommendations at the end of the report, as well as being followed up by a demonstration of a recommendation educational learning brief for prescribed fire. First of all, we're going to be talking about the purpose of the report, which is to find out whether or not prescribed fire is the best tool for land management. We're also going to be talking about the majority of information coming from books that you learned for a degree-seeking wildland firefighter at Fox Valley Technical College. And to further understand the concept of prescribed fire, the topics we will discuss from time to time will be relating to wildland fire, because prescribed fire comes from wildland fire. And to begin, we're going to be talking about what wildland fire is. Wildland fire is a fire that has been started by natural means and not by man. Basically started by a lightning strike, or maybe an electrical outlet blows and starts a fire in the wilderness, henceforth creating a brush fire, which eventually leads into land fires and forest fires and grassland fires. Wildland fires are extremely dangerous. If they're not caught in a reasonable amount of time, they can become extremely intense. Wildland fire has many characteristics when it is burning a forest compared to burning a grassland. When burning a forest, you can get effects such as crowning, undercarriage heating, and slash burning. In a grassland fire, you can get things such as quick runs, flash ups, blow ups, and even extreme temperatures. Considering what a wildland fire is helps us determine what a prescribed fire is. A prescribed fire is a wildland fire that is intentionally started by a man. Most prescribed fires are intentionally started by some sort of wildland fire DNR representative or Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior, certain organizations with the United States government and state government pertaining to natural resources. Even though a prescribed fire is meant to stay under the control of a wildland firefighter, at some times the prescribed fire will escape the control of a wildland firefighter. Once the prescribed fire escapes the control of the wildland firefighter, it is considered to be a wildland fire. Prescribed fire is given a certain area of land to accomplish a task, whether it be burning up dead vegetation or helping in the repopulation of certain plants or animals. Sometimes prescribed fires are basically just set to erode away dead and decaying forests. Maybe a forest that has been caught up by disease or insect infestation. By setting a prescribed fire to this forest, which would be a wildland fire, but as a prescribed fire it's under man's control, would help to extinguish the disease or the insects that are taking over. Some of the benefits that we're going to talk about today are how prescribed fire acts as a wildland fire to help rejuvenate the natural forest and grassland. When a wildland fire goes through, just like a prescribed fire goes through, the natural effects that occur would be the replenishment of nutrients, replenishment of wildlife, plants, and the natural balance of ecosystems and biomes. Prescribed fire is also beneficial in restoring plants to their native natural environments. Sometimes an invasive species of plant may invade an evasive area, and take over and start to kill the plant that's supposed to be in a natural prairie or a natural forest. When this occurs, one thing that we can do as a benefit is try to help out nature by eroding the invasive plant. By setting a prescribed fire, we'll take out basically everything in the area, burning it down to pure soil. But this will, in effect, kill the invasive plant, allowing for the evasive plant to regrow the following season. Fire can also help in breeding grounds, providing breeding grounds for insects or animals that are endangered, or on the verge of losing too much foraging ground. The way that this happens is sometimes insects are being taken over by other insects, and maybe one insect is more susceptible to fire than the other one. In this case, we can set a prescribed fire to a natural area and help replenish that plant or that animal or insect. Another thing that prescribed fires has a benefit of is in farming. In farming, what we can do is we can take a field, use a prescribed fire on it, let's say the last 10 feet around the edges. We can set a fire to that and eventually harden up the ground and burn away brush and forest and create more field for the crops to yield higher yields. Another way that we can do this is when trying to take back a swampy area. By setting a prescribed fire to a swamp, we can eventually, over consecutive burns through consecutive years, eventually get the field to reach farther into the land, henceforth creating more farmland. Some of the problems that we're going to discuss here are basically problems of prescribed fires and wildland fires. Some of the major problems with prescribed fires are the smoke effect. Sometimes smoke will float into a community and citizens will think of it as a nuisance, smoke lingering in their neighborhood for days. One thing about this, though, is that even though the smoke is a nuisance to humans, it is still helping in replenishing the forest that it's burning. Safety is another major concern or a problem that we have with prescribed fires and wildland fires. In a wildland fire, safety is a major concern for combating fire. You need to pay attention, stay aware, look up, look down, and look around when you're a wildland firefighter. As a prescribed fire, you have a little bit more luck by being able to pick what you want to burn, controlling how you burn it, how hot it gets, intensity, flame lengths, all that kind of stuff. So basically, in a prescribed fire, the problems that consist would be basically smoke, safety, and intensity of fires. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. History is going to be mostly related to U.S. and fire in North America. Fire's origin comes from lightning. Lightning is the #1 cause of all wildfires in the United States and can be easily recognized as striking anywhere if the conditions are right. Fire's history in America was seen in the earlier years as a force not to be reckoned with. By the time the 1900s came around, fire started becoming an opportunity. People would go out and light prescribed fires or light wildland fires to be able to combat them and being paid by the federal government or the state government. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, this was a major concern for the western territories or states. And in the northwest section of the continental United States, there were large logging and forest industries during the late 1800s and well into the 1900s. And fire there has become an extreme nuisance. It still is a major concern today. Prescribed fire, on the other hand, is a relatively new concept and has only been around for about 60 years. During the 1950s and the 1960s, there were large conflagrations that prompted the U.S. Forest Service to rethink their ideas on fighting wildfires and conducting prescribed burns. So during this time, I lost my train of thought. Prescribe fire basically was invented in the 1950s and 1960s. U.S. Forest Service decided they wanted to fight fire with fire. Sometimes when a wildland fire was moving through a forest very rapidly, if there was a crew out in front of the head of the fire, the direction it's going, you could light a fire there, and eventually both fires would get close enough to suck themselves into each other and extinguish themselves. That was pretty much the invention of prescribed fire burning. Some facts about it is wildland fire has to be started by, prescribed fire has to be started by man. Wildland fire is started by natural means. Wildfires occur everywhere on the earth that has vegetation which will burn. Prescribed fire is beneficial in restoring invasive plants to their natural environments. Fire's origin does come from lightning, one of the most intense sources of electricity as well as heat on the planet. And as history keeps being created, man will continue to find different uses and ways to fight fire with fire. As far as recommendations are going to go, better understand the benefits and problems of wildland fire. You need to consider whether or not it is a good tool for land management, which would depend entirely on whether or not humans wish to help protect natural forests for generations to come. Allowing wildland fires to be the primary source for tool management will not only establish better forests, it will also rejuvenate forests. In our recommendation here, we're going to recommend that when fire is started in a forest in, say, year 0, and every 50 years a wildland fire has ravaged that forest, that is considered to be a cycle, every 50 years, 50 years, 50 years. Once in that 50-year mark somewhere, there is a day that's missed. Instead of going 50 years, it goes 70 years. Now, if this forest doesn't see a wildfire at that 50-year mark, it will start between the 50-year mark and the 70-year mark, start decaying. This is where we would recommend a prescribed fire to boost that cycle back into effect for regenerating that forest. By allowing the forest to go to the 70-year mark, will allow for larger, intense fires by having more decay, and will also lead to wildlife being separated in more of a distance instead of a closely knit ecosystem. Well, basically, in conclusions to all this, wildland fire is prescribed fire. Prescribed fire is something that man has created, which is basically fire. We set fire to the land to accomplish a certain effect. So in this final demonstration here, we're going to explain an educational learning brief for wildland firefighting and prescribed firefighting. As a prescribed fire, this is going to be conducted as a prescribed burn. This is for prescribed fire and land management. The name of the burn is going to be the Oshkosh property burn. And I'm just going to read off here on the sheet. This would be the handout that we would hand out to people volunteering to help in the burn, helping to learn how prescribed fires work and what their actual effect is on the land. Things you would have is you would have a burn boss, and then you would have a purpose of the prescribed burn. The purpose of this prescribed burn is to repopulate the monarch butterfly, regrowth of the red flower, and stopping further spread of the invasive buckthorn brush. The objective of this burn is to completely burn as much of the target area as possible without spreading outside of the control area. The location of this property is between 47 and Jackson Street, down Highway 41, south of Appleton-Neenah area, just north of Oshkosh. The size of this lot is 40 acres, from this corner up, from this corner up. The number of teams that would be needed to combat a prescribed fire on this land to help in rejuvenating it would be at least 4 teams. You would need 1 on each side, north, south, east, and west. And personnel that we would be recommending for this burn is 4 to 20. You would need at least 1 on each side. Otherwise you can lap over and spread people out. The types of fuels, which are basically grasses or trees as a definition, that we have on this are basically tall and short grass prairies. This prairie section up front here is more of a short grass prairie, and this prairie back in the back here is more of a tall grass prairie. The whole property itself is kind of a rolling uphill, and then it slants down towards the back, and there's a forest in the back on the north end of it. The terrain level, like I said, is level to gently rolling. The fuel moisture that we expect to have, which is the amount of water inside the grass, is 25% or lower. The temperature that would be ideal for this burn would be 74 to 81 degrees. We would also need wind to be out of the northwest from this corner, blowing at a 1 to 10 mile an hour in this direction. The weather that we would like to have for this is partly cloudy to sunny. The sun does have an effect on the temperature of a fire. The burn time for this for starting is 6:05 a.m. in the evening hour, or in the morning, early morning hours where the sun is about to come up is the coolest part of the day. So it will allow for cool temperatures to keep the fire low and then eventually burn hot and extinguish itself. Some safety tips to remember for this prescribed burn are to maintain good communication, look up, look down, and look around. Now I'm going to explain just how we would conduct this fire as a prescribed fire burn. So what we have here is we have prairie, 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 prairie. And we have our 40-acre lot that we're burning. If you look over here, this is a tree line that runs off the west side of the property, and on the other side of that is an open field. This allows for a western barrier in case fire might escape out, considered to be called a wildland fire. On the eastern barrier, we have a railroad track that comes down, as well as a road on the other side of the railroad track, which will help prevent the fire from jumping too far. The distance here is probably about 500 feet. And on the south side, we do have a nice 4-lane road. It's actually bigger than what it looks. So this creates our barrier to the south. By having these barriers, we'll be able to contain our prescribed fire into our designated area. The start point will be up in the northwest corner here. By allowing it to start there with a northwest wind flowing this way, we will eventually get a fire that looks like this. That is exactly what you want to do. By having it up here in front of the forest, we're allowing it to not get into the forest. This would probably be some sort of soil break barrier, preferably 8 feet wide or more. Now what you're going to learn on this prescribed burn is that inside these prairies you have little butterflies, the monarch butterflies, and they are starting to lose what we call the red flower, which the monarch butterfly needs to reproduce. Because we are losing the red flower is because we have buckthorn brush that is coming down from the north, basically all over the state, kind of, and it is starting to invade this natural prairie. And in doing so, it's starting to kill off the red flower, which in turn is reducing the monarch butterfly population. By allowing this fire to go through, we're going to wipe out this, which is the buckthorn brush, the red flower, and the monarch butterfly for the moment. The reason we're going to do this is because red flower here grows a lot faster than invasive buckthorn brush does. So by the time this is burned, cleared, and dried, and is ready to reseed itself, this red flower will pop up everywhere fast, very, very fast, canceling out the buckthorn brush being allowed to come back in and push the red flower out. It will take the sunlight, it will take all the create shade so that the buckthorn brush doesn't have a chance to grow. And in turn, creating more red flowers in this area will help us to repopulate the monarch butterfly in this natural prairie. This natural prairie is protected by the state of Wisconsin through the Fox Valley Technical College program of wildland firefighting. Some of the things we have on here is basically a parking lot, and these are dirt track roads through the fields. This is all just a dirt area used for the bulldozer class, and this is just a giant basement that used to be a house. What we're going to have is we're going to have fire pushed out on these edges and eventually run down to here. We're hoping that through concern and safety we can get it to stop in this corner. The smoke that we're expecting from this fire is going to blow over this road. This is all open field down here, and this is actually forest over here. There's a couple of houses over there, but not too much concern. So as far as an educational moment or recommendation, we would recommend that a prescribed fire be set to this property to preserve the natural prairie on it. That is my recommendation report that I have for Liz Stern today. I want to thank you for listening, and I do hope that you did learn a little bit about prescribed fire and wildland fire. And our feasibility question again is prescribed fire a better tool for land management than not managing the forests and grasslands? Thank you.